Academica Media. You are listening to Charter School Superstars, bringing you the voices of an education revolution.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Kairalla from Doral College. Our guest this week on the program is the Director of Education, Safety, and Compliance at Flinn Scientific. Our guest works with schools across the country to promote lab safety and safe school reopening amid the COVID-19 pandemic. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting www.flynnsci.com. That is FLINNSCI.com. We are happy to welcome James Palcik onto Charter School Superstars. Hi, James.
Well, hello, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you here. By virtue of the show that we host, James, we get a lot of teachers and administrators and school leaders because that's who our audience is. But I'm always excited to talk to the folks who are off the school campus, who are helping serve the schools, who are helping make sure that the schools can be effective and, in your case, safe. And so I want to hear more about that role. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do at Flinn Scientific.
Well, number one, the work at Flinn Scientific has been very rewarding. For me personally, being an educator and continuing in the education market, but as you said, not in a traditional mainstream school environment, but on the supply side of it. And all of us here at Flinn work collaboratively to make sure that that exists. So it's not just what I do, I'm part of a much larger team to accomplish those goals. So in a nutshell, Flinn Scientific is a science, laboratory, safety, STEM supplier. So we supply everything from microscopes, chemicals, beakers, dissection specimens, but also a whole lot of digital solutions that work for simulations, especially right now in a blended or a hybrid or a complete remote distance learning environment. So we're very nimble in that we like to be able to say that we can facilitate teacher instruction, enhance student learning in the safest possible manner. So that's really what we do here at Flinn on a daily basis.
Well, I'm glad you brought up safety, and I'm glad you brought up equipment, because I can tell you on the top of the mind of every charter school leader I speak to right now is keeping their campus safe during COVID. It is a top priority. And schools are getting a lot of information right now from a lot of different sources about things like proper PPE, having the right physical distancing protocols, using masks. And let me ask you, from your perspective as an equipment provider,
Sure.
Is there a particular piece of equipment that you don't think is being talked about enough, but it's something that schools should really look into as part of their safe reopening plan?
Well, I wish I could narrow that down to just one singular piece of equipment, but I'll tell you what the answer is. It's awareness. That's what it is, awareness. And that awareness needs to go through the entire school ecosystem. It needs to go through administration. It needs to go through the teachers, the support workers, the students, and ultimately all of their families. Because we're all in this, and we're all in the business of intelligence. That's what education is. So when you look at what the authorities are telling us, and these are global, well-recognized leaders. So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, OECD, all of these entities, they all come and talk to us about the big four, the main four, if you will. So they talk to us about hand hygiene and the importance and vigilance of having hand hygiene. So washing your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds, multiple times a day. If you don't have soap and water, using hand sanitizer. And there are differences between the types of sanitizers that are available. So we can talk about that. The use of face masks. Very, very important. And again, they are not created equally. There are better versions and there are inferior versions, but the use of them is going to help prevent the community spread of COVID-19 and other ailments as well. social and physical distancing, absolutely important. And again, difficult to do in many school environments and school settings, but we are working creatively to come up with solutions. Larger tables, using the partitions or acrylic dividers, sneeze guards, if you want to call them that, sometimes are being employed. But they can't be used in every situation. So those acrylic partitions, for example, could not be used uh, in a chemistry lab with the use of certain chemicals because it will actually become cloudy, it could become crazed, and then it's actually no longer, it won't work for what you need it to do. So you have to have that awareness, and that's what the fourth one would be, is that overarching umbrella of awareness about how all these pieces work together. And everybody is intimately aware of the signage and the different things that are out there in retail environments, in schools, in public places. So directional arrows have moved us all into multiple new areas of buildings and schools. And honestly, it really does come back to that awareness. So we do our best here at Flinn to make sure that we are providing that thought leadership, but also giving people the right solutions for their unique environments.
Since you brought it up, I want to talk to you a little bit more about science labs because we've had experts come on this program in the past, and they've given us a lot of general advice about how these schools can reopen safely. We've talked a lot about masks
Sure.
and signage and dividers and things like that. But I think specifically the school science lab is an area that we haven't touched upon enough, but it seems like a piece of real estate in the school where transmission comes at a very high risk, right? In the science lab environment, there's almost necessarily going to be touching of equipment, whereas you might be able to avoid some of those things in other school subjects. So can you give us a little more perspective on what schools can do to keep their labs safer?
Absolutely. And we have been hosting a series of sessions specifically about this for months. So here are the high level highlights for the audience today. Science labs, by and large, were not designed to maximize the spread of people. They were designed, to really have people working together collaboratively
Yeah.
in small groups, right? As your science teams, you and your lab partner at a minimum, but usually 3 or 4 students working together. Now, depending on the environment or the instructional modality that's in place, you may have an full in school population, which is rare right now, but it could happen. And in those cases, you have to be extremely vigilant about cleaning all equipment apparatus as it comes out, and then immediately after you're finished using it and before it gets put back, stored away. And that can be accomplished in a number of ways. Some people are using the disposable wipes and they're cleaning off their microscopes and their balances. Now, to do that properly, it's one wipe per item. So you would never want to use it on one item and then take the next microscope and use the same wipe on it, because then you're potentially transferring,
That makes a lot of sense.
contaminating. Okay, so there is going to be increased consumption of those things. So one of the most common questions that we're asked here at Flinn Scientific is about the Lysol dip method. So the Lysol dip method is primitive, it's crude, and it's highly, highly effective. And that is really as simple as taking Lysol and putting it into, in a perfect world, deionized or distilled water in a big tub, and then you put your pieces of equipment that can be submerged in there for 15 minutes. Even your goggles can go in there and cause no harm. Take them out after 15 minutes, rinse them, let them air dry. In the case of your goggles, use some lens paper if there were any water spots on the acrylic lenses, and you're safe to do it that way. Now, your tabletops, your lab stations, those all need to be cleaned as well. Every school has approved disinfectant cleaners that they have been trained how to use, but that needs to be done more so in a science lab because of the number of people interacting in one particular area, and because of the larger surface areas that typically exist, whether it's a station-based lab, perimeter labs, peninsula labs, all those different variables. But everything comes back to just cleaning, and repeat. Just keep cleaning it as you're using it, clean it as you put it away, clean it when you take it out. That creates a bigger problem at the elementary STEM level, because
Oh
the
yeah.
teacher will be responsible for doing a lot of that. Whereas at the secondary panel, you can have the students do a lot of that as well. Just like you would never have your students just leave all of their lab tools out after a lab and go to their next class. You build in that time for them to do the lab activity or investigation and then clean up after themselves. Now, the suggestion is that you actually build about 15 additional minutes in just for the increased sanitation and hygiene protocols. So at
That
the elementary level, we're talking twice that.
yeah, at least.
Yeah, at least.
And the Lysol dip, that's pretty interesting. I've never seen this in action, but it makes perfect sense to me. But so we're talking about like you have a big tub with Lysol in it, and you're submerging any of the equipment that can be submerged and safely put in the Lysol
Right.
in between classes or after it's used.
So if it's yes, so if it is not electronic, so you would not want to put something that could be damaged in there. So you wouldn't put an analytical balance, for example, or a microscope. You would never submerge that in there. But your dissection tools, as an example, that can go in, no problem. Your different pieces of hand tools, your metric weights or masses that are used for different things. If it's non-electronic, if it's not plugged in, if it doesn't have lights on it, chances are you can use that. Now, does it have to be Lysol? It's another question that we're asked very often. And the answer is no, it does not. It's just called the Lysol dip method because it's been used for over a century. And that's what it's known as. But it would be whatever the disinfectant cleaner is that's approved for use in your school. Follow the directions on the label. So the Lysol dip method, if it's just the traditional regular Lysol, is a quarter cup of Lysol into 1 gallon of water. That's simple.
Quarter cup per gallon.
Per gallon. That's
Okay.
simple. Okay? Like it is, like I said, primitive, crude, highly effective. And that's what works. Now, some people will take that same solution and they will clean everything with a sponge or with paper towels because it works. Again, if you have a nice fancy lab, before you do that on your nice new work surfaces, do it in an inconspicuous area first. Just make sure there's no discoloring or things of that nature, because you want to keep that as clean for as long as possible. You don't want to have any residual effects from using a cleaner on that.
That's really great advice, James. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that you're sharing this incredible advice with our schools, because Flinn Scientific has always been a great source of professional learning materials for all the folks that your group works with. And that is no better expressed than with the recent activity that Flynn's doing now with the Flinn Professional Learning Series and some of the
Right.
materials that are available there. Can you tell the viewers and listeners a bit about that?
Absolutely. So during the spring of 2020, so just under a year ago, pardon me, we recognized that there was a need among the educators in the United States, and they were all searching for answers. And like you started the program, there really is an avalanche of information out there. There's also an avalanche of misinformation out there. And so what we were able to do here at Flinn was we sorted through all of the noise, and we were able to create some curated sessions using the best practices, the most reliable information that we could find from trusted sources, compiled it all together, and provided that to our audience on a professional learning basis, so it was ongoing rather than a one and done. And that really helped shape what happened across the United States. we were actually so successful in doing that Flinn was listed as a trusted expert or a recognized authority in multiple state school reopening documents that came out in the summertime. So we have been doing that, probably due to the fact that we've been around since 1977 in this very niche space of science and lab safety, specifically in the educational area. And that professional learning series continues. Actually, it's the PLS 4, or Professional Learning Series number 4, starts next week. And we're going to talk about a whole host of different things there as well.
Perfect timing. Now, for the folks who want to check these materials out, do they just go to the website, flynnsci.com?
Absolutely. Everything's there. It's very easy to navigate. We do our best to make it as user-friendly as possible. And if anyone has any specific questions, you can ask us. You can ask me personally. Like I said, there is an entire team of us here. And Ryan, what I want to make sure that everybody understands is that you have access to the entire arsenal of the Flinn time, team, talent, experience, resources, solutions for whatever that teacher needs to feel comfortable and confident in the classroom. That is what our mission is here. That's what our vision is. That is what our objective is. So when people say, "What's Flinn?" that's it. That is what we do.
Outstanding. I already know that the school leaders and teachers and students that listen to this program are really happy to have you on our side. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a lot. I didn't take nearly enough science classes in school, so I feel like I'm catching up with you, which is awesome. Let me ask you this last question before we let you go, James. If with the snap of your fingers you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
It's a profound question, Ryan. Profound.
That's what we're going for, profundity, yes.
Yes. Well, here's my answer. I would want all schools and everybody within that school ecosystem to be safe. That's what I want with the snap of a finger. I want my job to become obsolete. If I do my job properly, I don't have a job. I work myself out of a position. And if I could do that with the snap of a finger, nothing would please me more.
Well, you wouldn't have a job, but you'd have more time to hang out with us on this podcast. So, it's at least a lateral move.
Absolutely.
James Palcik, everybody, you can find out more about our guest's work by visiting www.flynnsci.com. That's FLINNSCI.com. James, thank you so much for joining us this week.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Ryan. I would love to come back anytime you'd like to continue the conversation.
Yeah, and thank you all for listening to Charter School Superstars.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.